So I'm your last TEDx speaker for the day, and I don't really have slides or a presentation, but I do have a story. And I'll start off by saying this started in 7th grade, and it's the first day of school, and I'm in a new classroom in middle school for the first time. And every year on the first day of school, the teacher takes roll in a really special way, and she takes roll by calling names out loud. And this is like your first opportunity to hear everybody else's name in your class. And I hate this day, because my last name is Zhang, so I'm always the last person to be called, and I'm always waiting. So I developed this habit, and this habit was that I would count all the names in front of me, sort of to pass the time, and also by the time they got to my name, I would know how many people were in this class. And this was a nifty number, and I like to toss it around in my head, so I've been doing this for like 7, 8 years now. And so the first day of school, she starts saying names, I start counting. And then halfway through this, I noticed something that might seem really obvious to many people, but at the time it kind of blew my mind. I noticed how people always said hello or presented themselves really differently. When the teacher calls your name, you either say here, present, or you raise your hand. And some people were shy, so maybe they didn't say anything, maybe they just raised their hand. Other people were outgoing, more confident. They were like, oh, hello, howdy, or maybe crack a joke. Some people were really distracted. They were like nudging their friends, okay, like cracking jokes and stuff. And maybe they didn't notice their name being called, so the teacher had to say it again, and they were like, oh yeah, I'm here. And I was thinking about this. And I was thinking about how I kind of wanted to present myself on the first day. After all, first impressions, really important, right? So I was thinking, oh yeah, I want to be brave, I want to be confident, I want to seem friendly and outgoing and kind. You know, I want to present all of these adjectives in the first word I say. So maybe I'll crack a joke, and then the teacher will laugh, and the rest of the students will laugh, and I'll make some new friends. And I'm going off on this tangent, so much so that I don't realize that the teacher has already put her clipboard down and she's been introducing herself for 3 minutes. So I awaken, and then I realize that my name hasn't been called, and then I'm really embarrassingly have to raise my own hand and say, well, you missed me, but for the last 5 minutes I didn't notice because I was too busy dreaming about what I was going to say. And this was also probably the first inkling I had about how much I cared about what other people thought of me. Because really, retrospectively, thinking about it, it's just one word. One word on the first day of school. Why did I have to think so much about it, right? But it was really important to me, and it became more and more important throughout my 7th grade year. I shrank into myself during 7th grade. Because during that entire year, I looked around me, and everybody else seemed like they had their life together. I looked, and I talked, and I tried to be like other people, and I thought the only way I could make new friends was to agree with people. You know, you like that band? I like it too. I've never heard any of their songs, but it's my favorite band, so let's be friends. And it didn't really work out because I didn't have a lot of friends in middle school, and I didn't talk very much either. And it got to a point where one day I was presenting a PowerPoint in English. And I looked at the board, and I was halfway through saying a sentence, and then I choked on a word. I couldn't say it. I couldn't get it out. I looked out at my classmates, and they were watching me struggle with these words, and all I saw were judgmental faces. While they might have been maybe sympathizing with me, maybe they'd had the same experience, maybe they were trying to encourage me, but all I saw were people who were either pitying me or laughing at me. And you know, the teacher has that encouraging smile on their face, like, you can do it, come on. But I didn't see that. So I lost my voice. And the story doesn't end badly, or else I wouldn't be up here talking to you guys, right? In my 8th grade year, I learned poetry. I had a wonderful English teacher who taught a poetry unit in English. And we learned about Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost and haikus and rhyming schemes. You know, I loved all of it. I couldn't speak, I couldn't express myself in my own opinions out loud, so I might as well put it on paper. And writing narratives were cool, but you could pump out a poem in 2 or 3 minutes if you were really passionate about it, right? So as a treat one day after class, our English teacher showed us a spoken word poem, and it was the first spoken word poem that I'd ever listened to, and it was called To This Day by Shane Koisen, and it's pretty famous. It's a wonderful message about anti-bullying and loving yourself. And I was so inspired that I went home that day and I Googled more spoken word poets, because that's what you do when you really like something. And I found more, and I was wondering, like, do people usually actually do this as a profession? Do they do it professionally? Can they make a living out of this, you know? And I found a lot of poets. I found people who performed around the world, people who struggled with English, people who couldn't even talk. They all did spoken word poetry. And I don't remember like most of the poems that I've listened to already, because I've listened to so many, but I remember one very vividly, and it was called Explaining Depression to My Mother. And it was this girl who was trying to explain through her poetry desperately to her parents that her own depression, her own anxiety, her own social issues, they weren't something to be taken lightly. In some cases, they might even need treatment or medication. And she couldn't get this point across. And that wasn't really what stuck in my head the first time I listened to it, but because, well, when she was performing, I couldn't really understand what she was saying because she would look so terrified. She was being video recorded and probably performing in front of an audience, and her eyes were super wide open and her arms were shaking by her sides, and she looked so scared. And when she spoke, she was shouting into the microphone. And I was kind of annoyed the first time I heard it, because I was like, oh, can't you say this like in a more, room voice? And then I listened to it again, and again, and again, and I began to understand. I began to think about how many hours she must have put into that poem. First writing it, then reading in front of a mirror, and then reciting it over and over and over and over, until when she got onto a stage, and her mind blanked out, and she couldn't remember any of the words she was supposed to say, that her muscle memory took over and she could just keep talking. And maybe she walked off that stage not remembering a single word she said, but at least she got them out. And then I'm sitting at home, sitting in front of my computer, already accepting that I can't talk anymore, that I'll never be able to speak publicly or make my opinions known to my friends, to strangers, to teachers. So I began to write poetry, spoken word poetry, and that's poetry that's written to be performed. And that's a little different from written poetry, because written poetry, you have to read it over and over, you have to analyze it, you have to take apart each word, and then get the message. But spoken word poetry is like words barreled at you. It's like raw emotion that's forcing itself into your head, whether you like it or not. And I really like that. I really like that idea of like squirming into people's heads and planting my opinion there. And it wasn't easy, but it got easier as it went along. I wrote poetry, I performed it for my family, then for my friends, then for my classmates, then for my teachers. And by the time I got to the end of my 8th grade year, I'd performed twice in front of the entire school, and I'd been invited to private organizations to perform. I also took place in my local library poetry slams. And you might think that it's the end. You've reached your maximum capacity for your poetry. You've done all these things, you've spoken to all these people, but then I moved again. And this time, I moved to Palo Alto. I moved to Gunn High School, where I'm currently a student. And with this came a new sense of pressure. Of course, there were new people, there were new faces, there were new friends that I had yet to know. But there's also pressure to do well in academics, extracurriculars, volunteering, get fit, do sport, get enough sleep, do your standardized tests, all this pressure that many students go through today. So I forgot about my poetry. It seemed like something that I didn't really have time to think about, so I forgot about it. And with that, I also kind of lost my ability to speak again. Of course, I knew how to make friends now, but I reverted back to my old ways with, agreeing with everyone. I watched that movie, I really liked it. Buddies. But it didn't help me very much. And I was so frustrated because I knew I had this ability to write great poetry, perform it, inspire people. I remember people coming up to me after I performed and saying, "Your poetry really helped me." And I loved that feeling, but whenever I wrote, all the words that came out seemed angry, and they all seemed to be saying the same things. So I wondered what was wrong. And then I was talking to my friend a year or so ago, and of course we were talking about college. So I asked him, "What do you want to major in?" And he said, well, maybe mathematics, because he likes math and he was good at it, and something in the STEM field, because Silicon Valley. And then he says something unexpected, and then he says, well, maybe English, literature? And I'm kind of shocked, because he's never told me that he liked reading in the past or analyzing famous classical literature. He likes digging through people's words and extracting those ideas. That sounds like something an English teacher would say. And then he says something that saddens me a lot, and he said, "Don't tell my friends." And I'm like, why? You should be really proud of this. I don't know a lot of people who still read or write in high school. Nobody has the time. But I already know the answer why he doesn't want people to know. Because he's scared of their judgment. He's scared that they'll pick up his books and say, "What is this, you nerd?" A lot of people take poetry, writing, art really lightly. It's not something that you can see the direct effects of. It's not a textbook. It's not a famous speech. It's not a program that will save hundreds of people's lives or maximize efficiency at a company. It's just poetry. It's just words. So I went home that day and I cried a lot, first of all, and then I wrote a really angry poem. But it was a different kind of angry from all the angry that I've written before because it actually had genuine emotion in it. I realized that at my time here, I had forgotten about my poetry, one, but I had also became ashamed about it. I was ashamed of this hobby that people didn't take seriously, something that I was passionate about, but people didn't like it. And I wrote this angry poem, and I can't perform it because it has too many swear words, but I'll perform a different one. But before I do that, I want you guys to keep in mind that everyone has a passion. And to be judged for it, that's normal. But if you take that to heart and you stop doing it, you've lost a part of yourself. If you feel like you have an urge to dance after seeing Gunn perform here, then just go and learn it. Who cares if people say you're too old or too fat or too skinny or maybe even too young? Go do what you want to do. Be passionate about it. And don't forget it. So my poem is called The First Drive. There are ashes falling on the playground. Like snow, they light up the tinder under my feet. I open my mouth, trying to catch a flake on my tongue. It burns the back of my throat and sets fire to my lungs. In second grade, I told my best friend to shut up. It was an innocent word. I didn't know what it meant. But her crocodile tears convinced the teacher to sew my mouth shut. She punctured my lips with needle and thread until they bled, and I haven't said a word that mattered ever since. I am in a car. My hands are shaking on the steering wheel. I turn to the instructor. I'm scared, I say. He smiles with a reassuring grin. Don't worry, everyone is nervous the first time they drive, nervous the first time I speak. I'm holding a phone. The bright green call button is blurring in front of my eyes. The numbers all in a line calling me up, waiting for the meat butcher. I ask him, how many cuts do I need to put into my own skin? Before I press the button and I hear a ring and I say, hello? And I hear nothing and they say, who is this? And I say nothing, and then a desolate beep. And the phone drops out of my hand like an atomic bomb. The firing of ignition in a car with my foot still on the brake, and it moves forward, and I wait, and I close my eyes, waiting for the crash. But it never comes. The wall that I built never existed. The words that I swallowed were just pieces of blank paper with no writing, no names, no fingerprints to dye my fingers a different shade of red. I opened my mouth and told the world to shut up. Listen to me, listen to my words, listen to everything I'd ever had to say, because I was never scared of speaking. I was scared of being heard. So I went to the mirror and I screamed slurs at my reflection. I went to the sidewalk and I screamed profanity at the next person that passed me and waited for them to take me away, drag me, fold me up, put me in a picture frame, put me on the wall. I waited for them to judge me, and when they were done, I was art. And the whole world looked at me with awe. And me, little me, inspired. Thank you.